Hey guys, this is Dave with Gazzadio. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Hiby R6 Gen3, which is Hiby's follow-up to the R5 Gen2. And the R5 Gen2 is a great DAP. However, there are definitely some notable improvements to the R6. And what I'll do is, as I'm going through the review, I'll talk about that and mainly just cover the improvements that I feel are noteworthy. But there are quite a few. You will pay a little more for the R6. It does come in at $499, while the R5 Gen2 is $449. As for what's included in the box, you get a Type-C to Type-C cable. You also get a clear protective case, an extra screen protector, and the reason I say it's an extra is because it does come with one pre-installed, not only on the front, but also on the back, so this isn't an extra one. There's also a cool green case available for $15, I believe, either on Hi-Fi Go's website or on the Hiby website. As for inputs, outputs, buttons, and knobs, on the bottom we have both independent 4.4 balanced and 3.5 single-ended line outs, and also independent 4.4 balanced and 3.5 single-ended headphone outputs. The R5 does have a single-ended line out, but not a balanced line out. Then we also have a Type-C input. On the right side, there are playback controls and a power button. On the left, a micro SD card slot, and then on the top, we have a dedicated volume wheel. The build quality of the R6 is very good, and it looks and feels great. It still uses the same type of angled cut design language as the R5, but it is a little bit larger, and also now again incorporates a dedicated volume wheel on the top instead of volume buttons on the side. Now, as for the specifications of the R6, there are some notable improvements of the R6 over the R5, and I'll cover those as we move along. On the inside of the R6, we have dual ES9038Q2M DAC chips. The R5 uses the ES9219C, and that is the same chip that's used in the BTR5 2021, the Channeling UA1, the IBASO DC05, Heidi's XO, and that is a good chip. But the 9038 does measure very, very good, and that's actually the one that's used in the Channeling UA5, and then of course there are others. And I realize it's more about the implementation of the chip than anything else, but from what I understand, the 9038 specs out higher. I do know the R6 supports DSD 512, while the R5 only supports DST 256. On the wireless side, the R6 supports dual band Wi-Fi connectivity and also features Bluetooth 5.0 and can decode UAT, LDAC, aptX HD, aptX AAC, and SBC. The R5 only has Bluetooth 4.2. As for power output, the R6 gives you 405 milliwatts out of the balanced output and 125 milliwatts out of the single-ended output. The R5 has 320 milliwatts out of the balanced and 110 from the single-ended. So there's an upgrade in power output with the R6 over the R5. Another area the R6 improves over the R5 is its memory. The R5 has 2 gigs of RAM and 16 gigs of internal memory, while the R6 gives you 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of internal memory. And it also does have the newer Android 12 versus the R5's Android 8.1. And on the hardware side, they also upgraded the R6 to the newer Snapdragon 665 from the 425. You do also get an increase in the display size from a 4.7 to a full 5 inches. However, the resolution is still only 720p, which is perfectly fine for me. So those are some of the more notable improvements of the R6 over the R5. However, there are some things they didn't change. For example, the R6 still uses a 4,500 milliamp battery and has an 18-watt quick charge feature. So you can get a full charge in about 2 hours. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that while this does have great battery life, especially in Class AB mode, which I believe is about 15 hours out of the 3.5 and 12 out of the balanced, that drops substantially in Class A mode to 9 hours out of the single-ended and only about 6 hours out of the balanced output. The R6 also has SRC, which is system-wide bit perfect audio. And it also has DTA, direct transport architecture, which allows third-party apps to bypass the system's sample rate conversion and maintain bit perfect output. So now moving on to the UI and software. Again, not only does the R6 improve on the hardware side with the implementation of the Snapdragon 665, but it also improves on the software side with the newer Android 12. And the difference is definitely noticeable. So not only does the UI have a more user-friendly design and layout, it also is just generally smoother and a little more user-friendly. So if you go into the settings and scroll down, you'll see the audio settings, and you can change filters. You can switch between Class A and Class AB mode. You have your gain modes, plugins, MSEB settings, which I will come back to. DSD compensation, channel balance, you can set your max volume, you can change the direction of your volume control wheel, and finally you can turn your MQA decoder off or on. But let's go back to the MSEB settings and we'll just quickly go through these. So the MSEB settings basically allow you to fine tune the R6 to your sound preference and then store it, or you can choose some predefined tuning styles, and that's your first option. You can also add a tuning file or save your own custom tuning file. And then you have the tuning adjustment sliders. We'll go through one at a time. So your first option is the temperature settings. So you can either have more of a warm sound or a cooler sound. You also have some bass extension adjustments. You can have it sound light or more deep, bass texture, note thickness, voice, female overtones. You have two different sibilance settings, impulse response, and you can also add or take away air. As usual, most of my testing was done with the R6 in stock mode, so with none of the MSEB tweaks or sound tweaks enabled. However, I did do extensive testing in both Class A mode and Class AB mode, and while the difference was audible, honestly, it was minimal, especially with IEMs. So with IEMs, what I noticed that there was a slight improvement in dynamics. However, I did notice a bigger difference with headphones, and that difference was mainly in dynamics also, but also with sub-bass response. It seemed like the overall sub-bass quality was improved in Class A mode. Again, but the most notable change was really in the dynamics. And that's not to say Class A mode didn't sound great, because it does. It's just that Class B mode also sounds great. So just bear in mind, if you decide to purchase this, that while this will sound very good with IEMs, you'll probably not really notice a huge difference between Class A and Class AB mode, and are more likely to notice a difference with headphones. Now, as for the overall sound presentation, it is neutral, and while there might be just a slight hint of warmth in the mids, for me it almost lands directly in the middle, so it doesn't lean too far towards being clinical or cold, nor is it overly warm. So just to break things down a little further, starting with the bass, as for bass speed and clarity, it's very, very good, but it does seem to be a little on the polite side when it comes to dynamics and impact. And while there is an improvement in Class A mode with headphones, it still lands on the gentle side, in my opinion. So while it doesn't quite have the engaging bass qualities that I prefer, it still has very good speed, control, and accuracy. Mid-range detail and clarity are also very good. Instruments and vocals sound natural, and there is good note decay. However, note weight is a little on the lighter or thinner side. And again, I wouldn't consider it thin, but it is definitely on the lighter side. As for the treble, It's detailed and well extended, so nothing is missing in the upper treble. Cymbals sound natural and have really good energy, but they're never harsh or overly splashy sounding. So while there is very good treble energy, it never becomes grating or harsh. Now, as far as comparisons, I have the RS2 and the R5. We'll go ahead and start with the RS2. I do slightly prefer the overall sound presentation of the RS2 over the R6, and I would attribute that to its R2R architecture. The RS2 has just a little more body, and there's a richness to the sound presentation, again, that is present typically with R2R sound that is not present with the R6. And that's not a quality thing, that's just my preference. So in terms of detail and clarity and dynamics and overall sound quality, they're basically the same. And of course, the RS2 has no wireless connectivity, so that means no streaming capabilities or the ability to download third-party apps. It only plays what you have on your SD card or cards. So it has excellent sound, but it's not very versatile. Now, when I compared the R6 to the R5, I did notice a slight sound improvement with the R6 in terms of technicalities, detail, and clarity. So in terms of sound performance, while I would consider it an upgrade over the R5, of these three DAPs, I still prefer the sound of the RS2. And finally, I also tested for background noise using my Zen Pros and my 2020 Andromedas, and the results were very, very good. There was no detectable background noise at all with the R6. So just to wrap up my experience with the R6, this is an excellent DAP, and I would, again, definitely consider it an upgrade over the R5 in almost every way. So increased power output, upgraded DAC chip, it's upgraded to the Snapdragon 665 and Android 12, upgraded Bluetooth, larger screen. So I do feel the extra $50 cost increase is justified. But would I recommend the R6? Absolutely, because I recommended the R5 and this only improves on that. So this is definitely an easy recommendation for me. So that concludes my review of the Hiby R6 Gen 3. If you're new to the Giz Audio channel and you like our videos, please take a minute and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to go a step further with your support, we also now have a Patreon. I'll make sure and leave a link in the description. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video. Please like this video. Please share this video. I hope you guys have an awesome day.